Good morning to you, our viewers. Top of the morning to you. It's a beautiful Monday morning. I guess I'm still in the mood of weekend, so I thought today was still Sunday. But it's the newspaper review here on Idea TV, where we take up on our national dailies, and also see what exactly is being said across all of our newspapers. Today in front of me, I have Punch, I have Daily Independence, I have Daily Trust, and a number of others. My name is Paul Oladpupo, and you're welcome to the newspaper review this morning. We'll start quickly with one from the Daily Independence this morning to see what is being said there this morning. We start with the news on page 6 saying that without reforms, the judiciary risks further public trust erosion. That's what lawyers are saying. Demand independent technology, cheaper access to justice. That's on page 6. And on page 29, we see that analysts see that CBN keeping rates steady. That's on the September Monetary Policy Committee. That's what they're saying as they're preparing for their meeting later on this month. Also, on page 7, it says that prevent strike by varsity unions, pro-chancellors tell federal government. That's on page 7. Still on page 7, we see that Serap gives INEC 7 days to punish politicians over early campaign. That is on page 7 of the Daily Independence this morning. And also on page 6, we see that the outgoing Rivers Sole administrator beg politicians to embrace peace. That's on page 6 of the Daily Independence. And on page 7, we see a story of federal government sending a warning to about 11 states urging evacuation of some local governments. That's on page 7. Meanwhile, on page 6, we see that Tinubu urged to impose emergency rule in Zamfara. And also we have a story that says that don't dent your image by running in 2027. Sergey tells Jonathan those asking him to run are selfish element. That is what Afegboa is saying. Obedient deny begging ex-president to step down for Obi. And also the big story here, we see here that 6 months to the deadline, only 14 banks have met the recapitalization. That was as regards the recapitalization of banks. CBN had given them a new standard for commercial banks, which they are expected to have, around 500 billion for national banks, for 200 billion naira for regional banks, and it's been a lot on them, and only 14 banks so far has been able to achieve that, and it's hopefully before the end of the 6 months, it's other banks will be able to catch up with this deadline set by the Central Bank of Nigeria. But let's take a look at also the story of the story on the judiciary. In Nigeria, there's a lot when it comes to the judiciary, and in fact, Nigerians don't even trust the legal system anymore. They don't trust the judiciary to carry out justice. So it's a very slippery slope in the real sense, and that's what lawyers are coming out to say, that okay, now it's time that we come back to the drawing board, try to reform our policies, try to make intentional judicial reforms that would shape the system, make the system very independent, make the system very trustworthy, because Nigerians don't trust the system. And how would Nigerians not trust a system that is so paramount, that is so important to every one of us, which is access to justice? Justice is a very, very much important aspect of any institution, of any community, any country. And so if some people do not have access to not just proper justice, but the right justice at the right time, and not just that not that it lingers, and also they're also advising that it's time to embrace the use of technology to enhance all of these things. Now we're seeing things like the telecourt, where the probably someone who's already arrested doesn't have to appear in court and all of that. You don't have to travel, miles down and all of that. You can just have your, a very good example was during the lockdown when we had no choice but to depend on technologies like that. And those are the things that these lawyers are asking for at the moment. Let us have more things like that. Technology, I also heard of the story of in some courts, the judge still has to take note of everything that is being said. So you literally, like, as a lawyer is talking, she sometimes will have to stop the lawyer to take notes and all of that. And these are things that could be easily achieved by recording devices and things like that. So it's a very is a wide scape of issues when it comes to justice in Nigeria. And I think I've also mentioned on this set as well, or probably on IMD, on how usually some people say months without even appearance in court. Appearance meaning that's trying to not even saying you are guilty. That's more like their first appearance. Basically, you say coming to court to say either you are guilty or not, and then they set a date for trial for you. So it's really sad that some people have to stay months before even making their very first court appearance. I guess we'll move on now to the leadership newspaper to see what is being said on the leadership newspaper. We see that federal government borrows 2.769 trillion naira from bond markets in 8 months. Also, custom approved $300 as threshold. I guess we'll quickly move on to the Guardian as well. At the moment now, seeing what is being said. But moving on to the Guardian. Akpabio orders Nigerians to tarry, says Tinubu reforms will bear fruit. That's on page 5, and that's the Senate President speaking there. Meanwhile, on page 5, we see that man warns against a decisive narrative in downstream sectors, and that's on page 5. Meanwhile, still on page 5 as well, we see that INEC orders tax on credible polls to avert protest. That's on page 5. Meanwhile, on page 7, we see that punish politicians in early election campaign. That is what Serap is saying on page 7. Also on page 27 is a story of 11 states may experience heavy rain this week, says federal government. That's the warning. Meanwhile, on page 6, experts divided over Fubara's return as emergency rules expires on Thursday. On page 29, we see here that PDP chairmanship ADA prospects unsettled as ADC coalition. Meanwhile, on page 27, we also see the story of Aregbesola condemns APC's economic policies. And also on page 7 is Don blames poor nutrition, poor policy execution for 45% child morbidity. And the big story here says that back to school. Parents struggle with step tuition hike as schools rising up X. It is very. I guess that should be operational expenses. It's a very. I guess the Guardian has so many stories to talk about. We're talking about now at the moment now we're already on countdown to Thursday. I guess it's 3 days left, basically 3 days and some hours, if I'm being safe. Down to the sole administrator to leave the office and hand over to the democratically elected governor, which is Governor Fubara. And it is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And also, it's expected that we actually want to see peace return to Rivers State and things move as they ought to move. And also, as regards the story of INEC, I guess I'll still leave that a bit. Also, the federal government has also warned that some states may experience heavy flood, especially this week. Someone was mentioning yesterday around me that we're already in September, that it shouldn't be raining anymore. But again, there has been warning over the years that we should be expecting rain even down to September, some parts of November, or even October as well. So there are things that we should just be expecting because of how things have changed, because now we're talking about climate change, how much we've affected our environment, how much harm we've caused our environment. And so it's we should just all try to look out for floods in our area, try to clear our waterways, do the right thing, expect and anticipate the flood. It might be in your local government or not. Also check the news and also check places like NIMET. I guess we discussed this last week Friday on the Idea Morning Digest, discussing on how to check on all of that. And also we talk about also on this page, The Guardian, is also the story of parents who are struggling with STEP tuition. It's a very interesting one. Schools are meant to resume today, and it's a lot because expenses have gone up even for schools as well. And they have to pay salaries, they have to do this and that, and it's expected. And also parents as well on the other end are also struggling, have to pay bills, this bills, that bill, and all of that. And now schools are resuming operational expenses, and also schools have also increased their fees, and it's really sad. And we all want quality education for our children, especially for children. And also, I guess we're going to break now. Once we're back, we'll continue with the newspaper review. We'll be right back.
5G technology. 5G technology promises to be a game changer by delivering ultra-fast internet speeds, low latency, and the ability to connect millions of devices seamlessly. It's going to fuel the future of smart cities, autonomous vehicles, and IoT devices, allowing them to communicate in real time. However, 5G rollout isn't without hurdles. High costs of infrastructure and regulatory issues in some regions have slowed down implementation. By 2026, the 5G market is expected to be valued at $667.90 billion, with the US, China, and South Korea leading the change. The challenge? Cybersecurity risks and data privacy will remain top concerns as more devices become connected.
Yeah, welcome back. This is still the newspaper review, checking up on our national dailies to see what is being said. This is Idea TV, and my name is Paul, if you're just joining us. Also, we'll move quickly to the Nations this morning to see what has been said. They call themselves the widest circulating newspaper in the country. It says that Ansaro leaders conviction victory in battle against illegal mining. That's on page 5 of the Nations this morning. Meanwhile, on page 7, we see that no going back on free distribution of fuel, which is expected to start today. That's on Dangote. And also on page 7, we see that Peter Obi visits Obasanjo Ladoja in Southwest Shuttle. That's on page 7. And still on page 7, we see that built on seed of reconciliation, Iba tells Fubara and also lawmakers on page 7. And also on page 6, we see that expert says that consistent drop in inflation rate would stimulate investment. And that's on page 6. Meanwhile, still on page 6 as well, we see that Bolsonaro president names Nigeria's Gumel board chairman of Sovereign Wealth Fund. That's a good news for us here in Nigeria. And also we see here a picture of All Progressive Congress National Chairman, the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, the Archbishop of the Catholics at the Catholic Bishop Conference of Nigeria, and a few others, right there with taking a picture, and a number of state governors as well. I can also see the state governor of Akwa Ibom in this particular picture. And on page 6, we see here that why not will not vote Tinubu. That is why why not will vote Tinubu by Niger State Governor Bago. President has performed to expectation. Power should remain in South till 2030. And also we see that Uzodinma books on APC. APC's 10 years in government starts September 30. That's on page 7 of the Nation this morning. Well, sometime last week, Dangote said that it was going to be distributing oil for free without any charge, and it's expected to start today. Although Numpeng has come out to say that that is a great gift. It shares. It looks very, very, very tricky, and people should watch out for it. That is what Numpeng said sometimes last week as well. But Dangote is saying that he's not going back and he's going to make this happen. And then also the sole administrator of Rivers State, who is expected to leave office on Thursday, has said that Fubara and also other lawmakers who were removed from office sometimes 6 months ago should come back to power with a seed of reconciliation. That's what the sole administrator has told Fubara and also other stakeholders who were removed from seats 6 months ago. And now we move on to the point to see what has been said. We see here that Dangote deploys 1,000 trucks, IPAN rallies marketers on the Punch, page 7 this morning. Meanwhile, still on the Punch, we see here that on page 29, that crude earnings fall by 3.18 trillion amid output surge. That is on page 29. And on page 8, we see here that the Kano 6 transfer from DSS to National Hospital. Meanwhile, INEC Catholic Bishop clash over 2023 polls credibility. Also, we see here that states pledge quality education as schools resume today. That's on page 8. Still on the Punch, still on page 6, we see that Lagos stops 6-story building construction after Punch report. And on page 3, Ogun urges residents to relocate over flood threats. And on page and on the big story here, still on Rivers, says that IBA defends 6-month tenure as opposition demands probe. That is what is being said. I guess I will start with the news on education. It's schools are resuming. A number of schools are resuming today. State schools, private schools, they are all resuming today, and we are expecting that students get the best of education. And I was watching a video yesterday, sometimes in the evening, and the speaker in that particular video was saying that it's not just about creating or giving students education, but we should also look at the quality of education that we give these students. And I guess that particular statement actually struck me in a very different way, because that's so now Nigeria is one of those countries that that undereducates their children. And they say undereducates meaning that they don't get top quality education. They have, when it comes to quality of education, the quality of education in Nigeria is very much dilute, and that is. I know that's one of the reasons why that statement struck me differently, because it is it's not just about quantity in the real sense, but it's about the quality of the education and how functional the education is. And we're seeing, and I know that there are moves all around, from state governments down to the local government, down to federal government as well, trying to ensure that students get the best of the best when it comes to education. And I also understand that very soon the Ministry of Education will be sweeping into action as regards teachers and also their certifications and licensing, meaning that any teacher who does not have a certificate or does not have a license will not be allowed to stand in the classroom. I mean, they clearly stated it in one of their tweets yesterday, that very soon that no teacher who is not qualified, teachers who are underqualified to be in front of the classroom, won't be found in the classroom. And so if you're a teacher out there, you should probably go and try to get your certification to certify that you have the right to be in a classroom. Okay, I guess we'll move on now to the next newspaper to see what's being said. We've looked at the Punch. Now we're moving on to the Daily Times. And we see here that TIN mandatory for bank account opening. FIRS clarifies. Sorry, TIN not mandatory for bank account opening. FIRS clarifies this morning on that on page 7 of the Daily Times. Meanwhile, on page 8, we see here that police foil caught robbery activities in Asaba. Ibasu arrests 63 suspects. And on page 14, we see that climate data need to stem finance risk. That's what and NOCK tells regulators. Meanwhile, on page 8, we see that NDLEA nabs India businessman with 3.9 billion naira tramadol at Lagos airport. Meanwhile, on page 2, we see that conviction of terrorist commander, a win against illegal mining. That is what Alake is saying this morning on page 2. Resident doctors suspend warning strike, bank on federal government assurance. That's a very solid assurance, I must guess. And also on page 2, we see here that federal government expands schools feeding program to 50 million mark by 2026. It's a wonderful one to see that the resident doctors have decided to slow down as regards the warning strike, and they are banking on the assurance that the federal government has given to them. And it's very lovely to see that they were able to reach a consensus as regards this, and it's amazing. It's also talks about also the actions of both the federal government and also the doctors to ensure that every Nigerian has top quality to healthcare services at the end of the day. And I guess that's very, very much wonderful and much appreciated. And and also we see here the story of illegal mining. I mean, illegal mining has been one that has been in Nigeria for a very long time. And I guess there was a time sometimes 2 years ago now that there was a bomb or a blast in some part of Ibadan. And it cleared out a number of buildings and all of that, and it was a very sad one. It was a very loud one, and even people far away were also heard it. And and then it was traced to a particular illegal mining firm with the way they handled the equipment and all of that, and it just blew. So basically, it's very nice that we're seeing the crackdown of all of these illegal miners, and we want to see more of them in the next coming days. Let us expose all of them, and also the story of the Indian man who was trying to smuggle tramadol down into Nigeria. I think tramadol is one of those drugs that have been banned here in Nigeria. So to see him with 3.9 billion worth of tramadol, I mean, that's a lot of drugs, and that will have caused so much here in Nigeria. And it's very nice that this was actually curbed also even before it entered the country. And I guess now we'll move on to Nigerian Tribune to see what is being said. On the Nigerian Tribune, we see that Governor Adeleke has surpassed APC's 12-year record under 3 years. Osun student leader says failed opposition aspirants should see what even the blind are seeing. That's what Adeleke is saying. And on page 29, we see that Dangote Refinery accused that man of misleading Nigerians, says it offers cheaper fuel despite importing 60% of crude. And also on page 26, we see here that travelers at risk as scam extortion rampant at Lagos airport. And on page 22, we see that Akpabio Akpumje to Nigerians, bear with Tinubu's over economic hardship. That's on page 22. And we see here on page 26, that's in health, as according to a study, that drinking too little water predisposes stress. Also on page 6, we see that Nigeria's economic back on global investor radar. That's what analysts are saying. And on page 29, we see that legal profession in turmoil over NBA's mandatory training. Is the new policy a fix or a flaw? Senior lawyers speak out. And finally, on page 12, we see that parents groans as school resume 2025-2026 academic session. We have no option but to increase fees. That's what school owners are saying. And also, stakeholders seek on mandatory sales of books in school, as according to the Nigerian Tribune. And I guess that's all we have to take this morning on the newspaper review. It's been a lovely one, and a lot has been said. But just before we go, I probably would love to touch light on the story of syrup and also INEC. I mean, politicians have been coming out to declare and also campaigning for for a very long period of time, which is very much illegal, and also it is not according to the constitution and also laws that are backing campaign. according to what is being prescribed, I guess it's SERAP, which is Social Economic Rights and also Accountability Project. They have called on INEC, which is the election commission here in Nigeria, to identify and also prosecute politicians and also political parties that are engaging in early election campaigns. In a letter that was dated the 13th, which was signed by the Deputy Director, urged INEC chairman, which is Professor Mahmood Yakubu, to enforce constitutional and also statutory provisions provided for campaigns. And so meaning that he's expected to take all of these people to book, those that are campaigning before the official allow of campaign at the moment. And I guess let's see how this thing turns out, because I think it was also on this set I also mentioned on how elections we're already basically in election period since sometimes in February. We've been talking about election. There's almost no day that you check the national dailies or check through the national news you will not see something as regards 2027 election, and all of these things shouldn't be. It is not constitutional. It is not. There are no provisions that back such. And I guess that's all we'll be able to take this morning on Newspaper Review. Thank you so much for joining us. My name remains Paul. And don't forget to follow us across all social media platforms at Arise Television. And also you can look up on other news at www.ideatv.live. My name remains Paul Oladipo. Thanks for joining. See you tomorrow.